Greed mode, the most polarizing addition to Isaac. You either hate it or think, it's alright. And if a pivotal game mode makes you feel like that, it is in some dire need of some fixing. In fact, Kilburn, one of the lead devs working on Repentance, just mentioned in an AMA how he wants to do a full revamp of the Greed and Greedier modes, and I could not agree more. We'll first cover what I think Greed mode does well. Then, we'll cover my issues I have with the mode as a whole, and why I don't go back to it. Finally, I'll give my own suggestions on how to improve the mode and bring back the hype for a brand new game mode. Oh, and if you feel like it, a sub would go a long way. I'm trying to hit 20k before the year ends. So, let's talk Isaac. I want to first list off the things that I think Greed mode does well, then delve into the things that I personally think will benefit the mode. Right off the bat, Greed mode does quite a few things well. I think the item spread is nice, having one free item, one item locked behind a key, a free guaranteed angel or devil deal on top of that, and the purchasable shop items right now is a really good balance for how the mode currently functions. It allows you to get some DPS off the bat without snowballing into too much power right away. It also allows for a good amount of player agency, which is one thing Repentance as a whole does really well. It is never a bad thing to give players choices, and I think that Greed mode hits the perfect balance when it comes to being able to shape whatever run you want. You get to essentially choose your entire build every single floor. Speaking of the actual mode, the wave-based combat system works surprisingly well. Now, I know a lot of people think it's a bit unfair, think it's too easy to be overran by all the hordes of enemies, but unless for some reason I get some early stat downs, I don't find a huge issue with it, at least not on any kind of common run. Also, if you were to take away the wave-based combat, you'd have to add something else in its place so it isn't just like a normal run. A wave-based mode has great potential to shine in Isaac, but it needs the right supporting cast to get there. Which is where my first gripe comes in, the lack of variety. Yeah, it's no surprise that Greed mode gets boring when literally every single floor and run plays out the exact same. Walk into the silver room, go to the shop, go to the curse room if you feel like it, buy a key, and go to the gold room. Rinse and repeat for like literally 5 floors. Now, I don't think Greed should have as expansive floors as the normal or hard mode, but it definitely needs something else. Runs have to feel different, and in Greed, they just don't. This is probably the biggest reason why I don't really ever come back to Greed mode. When I play Isaac, I'm looking for a fresh and unique run every single time. I want to see new synergies, explore huge floors, strategize my heart out, but Greed just doesn't allow for that. I mean, sure, you might grab different items and see different synergies the more you play, but at the end of the day, every run plays out the same. Every Greed mode run is just the same thing, but the items are different. Samey waves, samey structure, and only one final ending. That's another issue I find myself having with Greed mode. It's the lack of agency in your path. You get a ton of choices when it comes to the items that you pick up, but you're forced to follow the same exact path every single run. Even some of the secondary variations like Scarred Womb can't be found in this mode despite being added before Repentance. And this is in stark contrast to the normal mode of Isaac, where there are so many choices to make in regards to your final boss and the way you get there. The path to Mother, Beast, Blue Baby, Lamb, and Delirium are all very different from each other, taking you to different floors and having you fight through different mobs and bosses to get there. In Greed mode, it's one set path with one set ending. So how do we solve our issue of a huge lack of variation? Well, I have a few solutions. This whole rigid structure needs to be shaken up. As some of you might be aware, the alt paths were planned to be made available in Greed mode when Repentance first came out, but they were cut due to time constraints. You can access the Downpour, Mines, Mausoleum, and their counterparts through the debug console. I think we will definitely be seeing these floors make a comeback in the next big Greed mode update, and possibly Corpse as well as an alternative to Womb, and I could not be happier. Sure, the price of 1 key, 2 bombs, or 2 hearts might be a bit steep in Greed mode, but that could easily be rebalanced. Make the doors pay-to-play doors, like Downpour costs 3 cents to enter, Mines costs 5, and Mausoleum costs 7. Or, maybe, if to fight an extra wave to transform the ending door into an alt path one. Regardless of how they implement it, this change alone would make Greed vastly more interesting. The only sort of caveat to this solution is making the alt paths worth it. There are quite a few reasons to go to the alt path in the normal mode, such as an extra devil deal, mob and boss trap rooms, and the extra blind item in the item rooms. However, I don't think having an extra item choice is enough to make this an appetizing decision in Greed mode. A good reward could be having every wave have an added 50% chance to spawn an extra penny upon completion, which would lead to more money overall than your normal path. I don't think greed is a place to try and implement a mirror dimension into the downpour. But if they were to try and do that, you could have the player fight the 2 extra boss waves as a loss for some extra cash. It's just a thought though. But I don't think adding just the alt paths fixes our entire issue. There are still players who refuse to go on the alt paths because they find them to be too difficult. So if they choose to play normally, then the mode is still pretty boring. Now the other idea I have for variation is to get rid of the cursed room. Just get rid of it entirely, delete it, goodbye. But replace that with a random special room each and every floor. That old curse room slot can be a dice room, vault, boss trap, mob trap, library, planetarium, who knows? I just never understood the choice of locking it into being just a curse room when it could be so much more. Like imagine you get a 3-pip dice room and you roll all of your pennies into chests and keys and bombs. Or a 5 room that allows you to redo the entire floor. Or even better, you skip your gold item room for a few floors and you get a planetarium. This would make greed mode so much more fun and interesting. Just picturing myself on the mausoleum floor in greed mode with a dice room on my left would make me super excited to come back to this mode, but is that enough? And honestly, no, I don't think it is. There are 2 big things that I think would help greed mode stand out more. Now keep in mind, Kilburn said he wanted to do an entirely full overhaul. So while the things that I suggest may seem a little much, I don't think it's 100% out of the question. The first thing that I want implemented is something that just screams repentance to me, and not just the alt floors. I want to see some use out of red key or cracked keys. You would walk into your shop, and those cracked keys would be in the same rotation as the cards. Upon using one, it would open up a red room that is guaranteed to be some kind of special room. Let's say you get 4 rooms per floor, left of shop, 2 above the shop, and 1 to the right. And now these can be any of the game's special rooms, from trap rooms, dice rooms, etc. You know the drill. Each of these, for 5 cents in your shop, has good potential to shape the rest of your run, and adds a bit more strategy as well. Now outside of just cracked keys, it would be cool to see some cantrips cards make an appearance. Greed mode often takes place in just 1 room, so having 1-use item cards will make a lot of sense in this mode. Maybe just trim down the pool so it's not super overpowered. The last thing that I do want to see for normal greed mode are different room sizes. Your standard greed run is you fighting in a 1x2 for the entire time. And while that is a good size for something wave-based, imagine if that was horizontal, or an L-shaped room, or even a 2x2. This tiny change of editing the room size would not only make you play differently around whatever new obstacles you can find, but also add a nice visual change to your normal run. Obviously, a 2x2 or an L-shaped room would be a lot to manage, but the Afterbirth team did a great job managing them in the normal mode and the hard modes with teleporters. You could maybe sector off certain areas so that enemies can't rush you down unless you teleport to there, or create bridges with buttons that despawn every couple of waves. Even implement the bomb turrets to make them more manageable. And now I do have one more thing that I think would be cool, but I just don't see it working. I was trying my hardest to think of some way to add an alternate boss or ending to the game's mode, but nothing really thematically makes sense. Maybe something oriented around the 7 deadly sins. Or maybe going on the alt path route leads a player to a decayed version of Ultra Greed, which is much more challenging than the original, but allows for more money to be donated at the end. These ideas are pretty weak, but I thought it was at least worth mentioning. I think everything I mentioned so far has a good chance of making it in. However, I haven't even touched on Greedier mode yet. The issue that I have with these modes is not so much an individual problem. I actually do enjoy Greed mode, and I will be going back to it every couple of runs if it gets some upgrades. The reason a majority of people dislike Greed and Greedier mode is because they are the exact same thing. And when Greed mode's biggest flaw is that it is already repetitive, copy and pasting that same exact mode twice and making it even more annoying with less money drops and more waves just makes the whole experience unappetizing. Greedier mode is quite literally a copy and paste of Greed mode, but just more infuriating. Greed mode as a concept is cool, but having to play Greed until you get 500 coins in your machine just to play through every single mark again on Greedier mode is straight boring. In Isaac's normal mode, you can accomplish multiple post-it note stickers per run, whereas Greed is only netting you 1 per run. Meaning, you have to not only unlock another version of the already repetitive mode, but then play it again another 34 times minimum. The normal and hard mode get a pass. because normal is never required, and hard mode is unlocked from the get-go. Normal mode is just the training wheels for the roller coaster of hard, along with some fundamental floor, item, and health changes. I think if you made a clear distinction between greed and greedier, not only would the new one be a ton of fun to explore, but the old one would become more inviting to go back to as a result of it now being unique. How would I fix greedier? This is where I get a bit speculative, but also a bit creative. First off, a name change. I don't think it should be called Greed and Greedier. Instead, rename Greed Mode into Classic Greed, and Greedier into Neo Greed, or something like that. And the reason for this is pretty simple. I want Greedier to be completely different than the classic Greed Mode. I want an almost Necrodancer, arcade-like, wave-based beat-em-up that isn't just restricted to one room. I want the player to travel. I want the player to feel a sense of accomplishment, looking back at all they've gone through. The hardest part of rebalancing a mode is to make it not sound too fan-made. Make it still feel like its base game. So for Greedier, here is my very, very loose plan. The floor is no longer just one room. There are many rooms to go through, but it's just one straight path. It can be up, down, left, right, whatever. This is to retain the linear design that Greed goes for, but allow for a bit more expansion, since this is the unlockable, upgraded mode. And at the opposing ends of all of these rooms is one of Ultra Greed's doors, acting kind of like an enemy spawner. You have to beat this door to stop it from spawning even more enemies. Once the door is beaten, it becomes a regular door, and you progress to the next room. Each room is progressively harder than the last room, with more traps, spikes, spawners, what have you. Things that just make it overall harder to defeat the door on the other side. These rooms, by the way, can be any size except for closet, because we all hate closet rooms. The enemies these doors spawn are greed variants of normal enemies. Gapers are greed gapers, spiders are gold instead of red, etc, etc. They also all drop coins like Tainted Keeper's mechanic, allowing you to still get money, but it eventually caps out per room to avoid farming. This also allows players to gamble a little bit by letting more enemies spawn before breaking the door, letting them get more money, but at the cost of some very slight potential damage. Anyways, after reaching the boss room after maybe like 5 to 7 greed rooms, you're met with a pop-up shop ran by Bumbo. This is to incorporate more of Isaac's dad into the game, because Greed Mode is all about him. Bumbo has one half-priced item for sale, 2 items you must buy from quality 0 to 2, and 1 slot for quality 3 to 4, along with a restock machine. There is also a blood bank and a heart on sale, but it doesn't immediately refresh like it does in Greed Mode. This is to prevent item stacking, since you have to pay for the restock machine to reset your items. If you buy out all of Bumbo's shop, he'll drop a random lower quality item, maybe like health or something. Then you move on to your boss fight. I think it would be cool if the Bumbo bosses were here on this mode, but that might be like a ton of extra work. Maybe just some reskins of some already existing bosses. I would like if the boss fights had greed doors that would release greed gapers occasionally to allow for more money, but it's not a necessity. The boss can drop one regular boss item, and then an angel or devil deal if you just so happen to defeat a greed door during the boss fight. You do this for a good few floors until the final floor. I like the way that Greed Mode does the final floor as just a boss fight. The boss fight itself is still ultra greedier, and the first phase remains unchanged. Now again, I don't really know what I would do for a boss fight, but I think making it a mom-dad combo could be pretty cool. The greed doors could spawn mom's hands, the foot could stomp down, etc. It feels thematic. The Legend of Bumbo is showing how both parents are at fault, and it would make the fight more intense. I think I have a good skeleton to go off here, but it definitely needs some more fleshing out. Special rooms, red rooms, secret rooms, branching paths, etc. But I think what I presented is a lot more fun and unique than what we currently have. Now remember, I am not a game dev and I don't claim to be, but I think ditching the standard greed outline for something that is reminiscent but not the same is a good start. Opening up the map after beating a full floor is a good feeling, and I want to feel that in Greed Mode. In order to replicate the feeling in this mode, however, there would have to be some adjustments, and I hope the devs have something special for us up their sleeves. As I said earlier, if you change up either Greed or Greedier individually to a new format, it would, as a result, make the old format a bit more inviting to go back to. So how would you guys do it? What do you want to see added into Greed Mode? Let me know down below. If this video does well enough, I'll make one about a Void rework, so like and subscribe or whatever. In the meantime, I've been BD1P, peace out, and goodbye.